All right. Well, hello, everybody. Good evening at home, too. I'm Jessie Cromer Mel. I'm really excited to be here tonight with some of my favorite people. Daniel Cole, who is my co-conspirator as a prairie steward at Harlem Hills, and then Amy Dow, who is my friend and advocate for prairies and my boss at Friends of Illinois Nature Preserve. So one of my other hats that I wear is that I'm a field representative for Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves, and I've been in that position now for about 10 months. And Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves is an organization that started at the end of 2019, and it's been an organization to really try to bring awareness to these amazing nature preserves that we have in Illinois, but also just really underscore the need for friends and nature lovers to come and help protect and keep an eye and tend to these beautiful places. So Friends has been a really important organization, not only for the nature preserves around the state, but also you probably remember that during the crisis with trying to save Belle Bowl Prairie, Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves was a really integral part in advocating to save Belle Bowl Prairie. And in the wake of losing so many acres of Belle Bowl Prairie, the focus, really came into bringing more field reps into North Central Illinois and growing that awareness throughout the state. We really saw a need to bring the Friends model of helping to provide a sense of belonging and stewardship into the larger Winnebago County area. So as we were trying to figure out where to begin, Daniel and I met several times. We visited some different nature preserves, and we started to consider what nature preserve might be a really good site to begin our stewardship and to begin cultivating that community around stewardship. And it really quickly became apparent that Harlem Hills Nature Preserve would be the perfect place to start for a variety of reasons. How many of you have been to Harlem Hills? I assume most of you. Right, great. And some of you have volunteered. Jackie's been a great volunteer for us out at Harlem Hills. It is just an absolute gem here in the area. And I highly recommend, if you haven't been out there, that you go check it out. It's kind of like Winnebago County's best kept secret, I think. And one of the reasons that we chose Harlem Hills was because we really wanted to find a site that was deeply inspiring and beautiful. And as many of you know, George Fell, who started Natural Land Institute and also started the nature preserve systems in Illinois and the Nature Conservancy, he really had a big place in his heart for Harlem Hills. He had his honeymoon there, and his father took him there as a boy all the time. And so that was kind of like his sense of place, was going to Harlem Hills. And so you kind of start to follow that thread and realize that so much of his passion for saving natural areas was due to that, falling in love with Harlem Hills. So that's kind of a special thing there. And then certainly, after Belle Bowl Prairie, which was another gravel prairie, this, Harlem Hills now is the largest remaining gravel prairie left in the state. It's really represents about more than 70% of what's left in the state. So we really wanted to gain more awareness and education for people about how precious these remnant prairies are. So that was another reason that we thought it would be really great to focus on Harlem Hills. And then, it's also very accessible. It's located right in Loves Park. And so anyone, in the community can really easily get to it. Even though, like I said, it's a best kept secret, it is very accessible compared to a lot of our forest preserves and other natural land sites around where you have to drive quite a bit. So it kind of gets past that barrier of transportation and allows more diversity of people to come and help tend the site. So those were some of the things that we considered when we wanted to pick a site to begin with for focusing our efforts here in this north central unit of Illinois. So I'm not going to speak any longer because Daniel's got some really good stuff to share about the specifics of what we've been up to at Harlem Hills and some of the really great plants that we've been monitoring and tending. So I'm going to pass it on to Daniel, Daniel Pohl. You can come on up, and this is your slideshow now, so you can go ahead and forward it. I'll let you introduce yourself as you want to be introduced, and go for it.
Thank you,
Thank
Jesse.
you, Daniel.
Guess not the arrows, huh?
The arrows are
Down. Do you know what I hit?
Yeah, sure. You start the slide.
Oh, okay, so there you go.
Hey, hello, good evening, everybody. So, as Jesse said, my name is Daniel. I think I know quite a few of you, but I work with Jesse out at Harlem Hills, and I have not practiced this speech, so forgive me if I'm a little disorganized. But currently, I work for the DNR and Forestry with the Illinois Natural History Survey, and I volunteer at Harlem Hills. Some history about me: I actually went to Harlem High School, just down the road from Harlem Hills, and I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that Harlem Hills is the first prairie I went to in high school. I think probably because my boss at that time at Ender's Greenhouse in Meyer, or maybe Fran, told me you have to go to this prairie. So I remember going there in high school. And now that I'm back in Rockford, it's really a pleasure and privilege to work there. And I'll also say I am not the world's foremost expert on Harlem Hills. There are a lot of people who know more about the site. I'm still learning. And I'm also not the foremost expert on restoration, still learning, but that's, I think, one of the most exciting things for me, and hopefully maybe for other people that want to get involved, is you get the opportunity to really interact and have a relationship with the land, inputs, outputs, and kind of see how it reacts to the things that you're doing. And for me, that's been really special, and I look forward to it continuing to be special. So in any case, mainly what I'm here to talk about is what we've done in the last 2 months. So as Jesse said, Harlem Hills is the largest remaining gravel prairie. And it was originally protected by the Natural Land Institute and then dedicated as a nature preserve in 73. So this work, so I'm also really excited that Friends has decided to invest in this part of Illinois, because they've had a lot of different stewardship activities going in Northeast Illinois. And so the fact that Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves has decided to have a dedicated person in this area is really awesome, and we should be very grateful to them and support them. But it was originally the IDNR heritage biologist, Melissa Greikan, who wanted to start some more volunteer stewardship at some of the sites that she works at, Illinois Beach, Willow Bog, and Harlem Hills. And so also really grateful to Melissa for kind of spearheading that, working with Friends, and now working with us very closely on the work that we do there. So some of you may know this book that came out in the early 90s. It was, we are so lucky in this county to have such a complete vegetational and floral history. It's amazing. I have this book electronically if anybody wants me to send it to them. But there are lots of interesting things in this book about the plants of Winnebago County, some that are still here and some that are not. But it also has really good maps of what existed at least in the early 90s. And one of those maps shows, I made them green dots, if you can see them, the remaining prairie remnants as of the early 90s in Winnebago County. We're also very lucky that we have more remnants than some of our neighboring counties that really got converted to ag very quickly. And part of that is because of the legacy of the fells, and perhaps because some of them weren't very easy to farm, but some of these remnants are gone now. One of them, I think, north of Harlem Hills was the Perryville Road extension. And then one of those green dots is Belleville, which is partially lost, but still there and in need of protecting. So one of the things that I want to talk about is, I guess, I want to throw it to you quickly and say, when people ask you what's the importance of preserving a remnant when you can just make a prairie over here, how do you answer that?
You can't do what Mother Nature's done for a million years. No.
We can't just make a prairie.
Especially if you're a gravel prairie, you're not going to transfer that from one place to another.
No.
Right. I think all of us need to be practicing how we talk to people that don't understand the importance of these things and try different messages and see how they resonate with people that just don't have background that we have and don't understand kind of like what makes these places special. Sometimes even when people look at them, even when they're in full bloom, they just see weeds. Which, you know, we get a special sight when we learn more about these places and how special they are. I wish it was enough to just say this place should be protected because it's beautiful and interesting. But for instance, just scientifically, if you're doing a transect, a vegetational survey and a restoration, you'll get maybe 8 species of plants in a transect and then a remnant 20 to 30. A lot of these species are overlooked and not planted in restorations. There's an interaction that happens. The indigenous soil is so important. There's a lot of things going on. And then I feel like this picture really reminds us too, when you're talking about uncommon or rare plants and their pollination, each of these islands depends on the other. And every time one of them blips out or is kind of lost to restoration, it endangers all of them. And so that's some of the things that I like to say. But you know, hopefully we can get better and better at that message because it's going to continue to be important. So we started the day after Christmas. I think it was
my birthday.
It was oh, we start. Obviously, that's why. And it was a good crew. We decided, I mean, Harlem Hills is almost 100 acres and it's in 3 parcels. I don't know if you know that. There's like 2 secret places, but we decided, you know, winter work, brushing is fun, right? So like it's nice to have a burn pile. And so we're focusing on kind of like the southwest corner, partially because there's a dry gravel ridge right next to it that is really high quality. And anytime you have a really nice high quality area that's getting some shade from trees or encroachment by woody vegetation, it starts to like kind of endanger that high quality area because prairies really want sun and wind to really thrive. And so that's why we decided to take the brush out of this area, girdle these walnuts, and really try to open it up a little bit. And so we spent a few months doing that, which was fun. And you could help us with that this winter too, which is awesome. And then we also collected some seeds that were remaining. There's not as many seeds, you know, as this part of winter, but we did find some rye, some thistles and stuff. And the other thing that's really cool about the work days is that there's people with so many different like interesting backgrounds and knowledge about stuff that we can share with each other during those work days. There's this Jack Shoba and Laura from NLI. But this was the area that we opened up that used to look like the honeysuckle behind it. And a lot of these are kind of like those early successional kind of disturbance loving weeds, you know, like avens and things like that. But a lot of them are some of these other things that we want to get started. That shows that area opened up. And so now air has a chance to move through here and everything over time. But this is this summer. This is just a few months after that work. And so that's Royal Catchfly. What's that?
Is that natural or seeded?
Some of it's natural because there were like kind of pockets of openness within it, and some of them was some of it's from the seeding that we, yeah. And so, yeah, it's pretty exciting. And then we were like, hey, everybody remembers how warm this past winter was, and like things started kind of coming up really early. So March 10th, I went out and we saw a pasque flower, and we're like, well, I mean, pasque flowers are just so special, just because of the time of year that they happen. They're not common in Illinois. They're more common north of us, and they're just freaking beautiful. And so we're like, let's have a pasque flower event at Harlem Hills. And that was the day. So, but unlike this pasque flower that looks a little diminished, we were really excited to have our, and we had a good showing. We, Jack Shoba talked about some of the history of the pasque flower and some really interesting stories about it. And we cleared some of the fence around the entrance, and we got some seed from a uncommon plant called downy yellow painted cup from NLI, and we spread it in the area where that plant currently exists to augment its population. So it was a wonderful work day. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, everything was like boom again. But this is really, I mean, I feel like there's seasons of beauty it's beautiful all year, but I think the pasque flowers, like with the cone flowers, it's a season of beauty that you really have to experience if you haven't yet. So these flowers, like the kind of the tops of the ridge, and they're not hard to find if you go out there. The other thing that's really exciting about the project is that we have partnered with the Chicago Botanic Garden in their Plants of Concern program. Are people familiar with this program? And the reason you're not is because similar to Friends, it had a presence in Northeast Illinois being a part of the Chicago Botanic Garden. But recently they've started to expand as well. They have a person that works in Southern Illinois, Chris Benda. They have Grant who works in Northwest Illinois. And they have a really awesome model where they empower citizens, volunteers to become citizen scientists to monitor threatened, endangered, and otherwise rare plants. And you do it on an app. This app, that app right there. And so with the training is online, it's 6 modules. It takes about an hour and a half. And then with a little bit of guidance and making sure that you're correctly identifying the plant and know how to count and that type of thing. Sorry, that didn't, know how to count that. Okay. I'm not opposed to you helping if you don't know how to count though. You can still put flags next to the plants and we'll count. I meant like how to count whether they're flowering or not in a clump. It's a little technical. Anyway, but
If
it's
you can ID the plant, someone else will count them for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
exactly.
The shortage is not of people who, yeah, people could
Things you hear yourself say. But so it's a really cool model, and we can't really understand what's happening with these plants unless we count them year to year and see, are they improving? Are they declining? And so this past year we monitored 4 threatened or endangered plants. One of them, kitten tails, is state threatened. The middle one is the downy yellow painted cup, which is kind of like the scarlet paintbrush. If you're familiar with that plant, it's a hemiparasite that's state endangered. And the third one is the prairie bush clover, related to the round-headed bush clover, but a little bit different in how it looks and its preferences. That's not only state threatened, it's also, that's state endangered, but federally threatened. And that's actually doing pretty well at Harlan Hills. The 4th one we monitored is this little guy, which is just the cutest thing. There's a lot of buttercups, but the prairie buttercup, Ranunculus rhomboideus, is, I think it might be my favorite. It's so cute. And so I actually went out, I think a few other people came out too, but we went out 6 or 7 times because they bloom for a few days and don't. And so to find them, you have to go every few days and flag them, because after they're not flowering, you ain't gonna see them. But we counted 31 this year, which is pretty cool. The other thing that I did, because I thought, well, if we do want to try to supplement the genetics of these populations, we may need to introduce some seed from nearby or take this seed nearby. These places being so far apart, the genetics are really kind of insulated and bottlenecked. And so the 1955 Flora of Winnebago County had 3 additional locations for this plant other than Harlan Hills, and the 1990s update had an additional 3. So I had 6 places to look. 3 of them are gone, and the other 3 I didn't find. So the closest populations of this plant are up in Rock County, Wisconsin, and McHenry County, Illinois. So we will do what we can to make sure that it's thriving, but it gets tough. So the other thing that I think is kind of interesting, the state is redoing every 5 years they redo the threatened and endangered plant list. They update it with input from experts. And that's happening right now. I think it may be going up for votes and stuff in October. I don't know if you know that, but the other thing that happened is there was a project that the IDNR funded the Illinois Natural History Survey to do called the S-Rank project. Has anybody ever heard of an S-Rank? Okay, has anybody heard of a C-value? Okay, so there's lots of different fun numbers if you want to get really nerdy. But a C-value is the coefficient of conservatism. This is different than what I'm talking about. The S-Rank is, S stands for state. It goes from 1 to 5, where 5 is like, it's good to go, we've got a lot of it, and 1 is like, it's gone. And so 3 in the middle is considered vulnerable. And so scientists, botanists from the Illinois Natural History Survey went all through the state over 3 years, looking for some of these plants that hadn't been seen for a while. And they updated the S ranks, the state rank of every plant in Illinois in this project. And then took those S ranks and looked at, I'll show you in a second, the global status, and made a watch list of plants. They're maybe a little bit too common to be considered threatened or endangered in Illinois, which is a political boundary. But they are in need of attention. One of them is the American bittersweet. Another one is Hill's thistle. And so when you look at whether something's threatened or endangered, you're looking at it in a state, which is kind of a random boundary. There's some things that are rare in Illinois because we're just at the southern part of their range. But the question is, are they rare everywhere? And Hill's thistle is one where even though it might occur kind of in this cluster of states, it's uncommon in all of them. And that's why it's considered G3 or globally vulnerable. So every plant has an S rank and a G rank. And so if you want to kind of understand really the true bigger picture of what is in need of conservation, I encourage you to look up, you can look up insects and other things, animals on NatureServe. It's really valuable. So highly recommend. So the activities that we have done at Harlem Hills are not unique to, they're pretty much the activities that everybody does, because that's what you have to do for restoration. But so it's, you know, not like rocket science, but brushing and girdling, you know, we did some fence work, the monitoring, which is, I think, is really exciting, and also an opportunity for people to get involved if you want to adopt a plant. Weed mapping, we use ArcGIS to map some things, Melissa and I do, and then pulling, identifying herbicides, seed collection, the IDNR burns every part of Harlem Hills every other year, so it's on a rotation. And then appreciation and education, some of the events we've had or coming out to learn about stuff. But I think the other thing that's really important about having people involved with nature preserves, as opposed to just having them live in a fence and not be developed, is that you get to, like, if something happens, somebody's there to see it. And one of the things that happened was that we had a person, or a couple of people, that were illegally riding an ATV on Harlem Hills throughout the month of July. And the person that discovered that is a dedicated steward who's been working there for years, Chris Reisetter, who takes care of, I should say that Harlem Hills is owned by the DNR, except for a tiny portion that's still owned by NLI. And Chris has been going out there to pull sweet clover and parsnip for many years, and was out there and noticed the tracks, and he alerted us. And then, you know, we learned a lot through the process of that month. There was some miscommunication about some things. And then, you know, it's tough because each of these areas, you know, just IDNR is a little under-resourced and stuff like that. So in any case, but I think what was good that came out of it was that we understand the process now of reporting these things and what needs to happen from a CPO perspective. And we also met the neighbors. And so it sounds like not revolutionary, but they were, okay, so Melissa doesn't live nearby, like Jesse and I, the heritage biologist, and the CPO doesn't live nearby. And so they were telling the people that don't live nearby, and then they were telling, so it's just like, no, we need to just talk with the neighbors, because we can just come out there. I live 10 minutes away from Harlem Hills. And so the other thing that was really special for me is that you know, there was a moment where it was like, we just started having trouble putting an end to this. And I feel like some of the people in the restoration world really stepped up and made us feel like we're in this together. And so through some temporary fencing and additional signage, the unauthorized ATV use at Harlem Hills has ceased. But it's a big place, and so if people aren't going out there, or if they go out there and they notice it, but they aren't connected with people that take care of it, that could make a place vulnerable. And so looking ahead, I think we want to continue to do what we're doing, but amplify it and do more of it. We want to get people involved and empower those people to take ownership of either a piece of Harlem Hills, you know, like we could call Chris's section Chris's Corner. There could be like a Kathy's Corner, you know, like, you know, Bruce's Knoll or whatever, you know. And that's the model at Somme Prairie, which is kind of the model of stewardship that Friends really looks to, getting people involved. Or it can be like a specific task, like monitoring a plant every year, which is kind of cool. It's like, you're like, every year, you're like, no. And it's like, or like looking for a weed, you're like, so we actually made some really good progress on some of the more noxious weeds that we have, mostly from hard work by Melissa, but like birchwood trefoil, knapweed, parsnip, some other things, sweet clover. Just going out there and seeing like, oh, it looks like there's some of this popping up in this corner, and contacting Jesse and I, or you know, a flag around it, like a bow tie or something. But we are excited to continue to do the work we're doing, and we hope that we can get more people involved, because there's enough work for more people to get involved. And so we hope that you'll join us. And you might get cupcakes from Jesse on your birthday. So sweet. So I just want to thank a lot of different people. And I'll just say their names because let's talk about it. Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves, IDNR, especially Melissa, Caleb, Brad, John, and others. You all for sponsoring the work that we do out there, which has been really helpful. Everybody at NLI, Laura and Tyler who've shown up to our work days, Chris, Jerry Paulson, thank you. The neighbors who are Kathy and Kelly, I think one of them might be listening. Plants of Concern program, Joni and Ben, Seaver Sandels, Jack Shoba, and everybody who's taken care of Harlem Hills for the past 50 years. We hope to continue that work indefinitely. So, thank you.
When can they join you?
Oh, sorry, we do.
Zero.
Ask Jesse to get on the email list, but we do have a workday actually scheduled this summer. However, there's some much needed rain in the forecast, and our activity would probably be seed collection, which is not awesome to do, even if it's a little bit of rain, because it gets up. So please see Jesse to get on the email list, and hopefully we'll be able to have our workday, but if not, we'll have some soon.
And regularly on the fourth Sunday of the month.
Oh,
from 1
that's
to
not
4 as well, and we're gonna be having a big kickoff in October, so stay tuned for more. That's okay. Yeah.
This is yours. Did I,
So I think. They're on the screen.
this one?
Yeah.
Nope,
That's not it?
I think that's yours. See, that one's yours.
Oh, okay.
So I thought I just minimized it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, hold on.
If you go to PowerPoint, is it there?
I've seen
It is right here.
Yeah.
Do I need to share a different screen? Hold on, this might take a second. Okay.
Oh, I wonder.
Yeah,
if
I
you
think
go to
over used
screen share it.
Okay.
Is it coming? All right.
That's probably the same thing we started with. But Jesse, is there a 50th anniversary?
It was last year.
We
It
missed
was
the one.
73.
Is it sharing the right screen?
Yeah.
Let's see.
It'll be the
All right.
50th anniversary of the second
Got it.
year.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about, we talked to Daniel and Jesse did such a great job. I want to listen to Daniel talk more and more about what is happening at Harlem Hills. But I was invited to talk a little bit about like what then is Friends doing more statewide and also, and Daniel did a great job of answering this question. Like why is a Friends group needed for the nature preserves? If the land is already protected and you can't develop it and you can't put a road on it and you can't farm it and you can't put a building on it. But the fact is that we've learned that advocacy can't end just because a law is passed or a place is protected. And so that's why that kind of formed the foundation of why Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves came into existence. Some of it was some decisions that were happening at the state where the nature preserves director didn't get reappointed for like 5 years, but also, so there was that bureaucratic need, but also the need that we have of people are driving ATVs through our nature preserves and
Just a second. I think
Yes.
we Somehow managed to stop screen sharing.
Oh.
It says that it's paused.
All right.
no, I think
I'm just gonna do it
when
again.
It switched the.
Yeah. So it's this one right here.
It's all your fault, Amy.
Is it this
I
one?
take blame for lots of.
Is it that one right there?
Yes, that one right there.
All right, share screen. And it is this one
That
here.
one right there. Yes.
Share.
There are a lot of,
Yeah.
this screen looks different than this screen and I think we're good.
All right, hold on. Slide.
There it goes.
Is it going?
We're good. Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're good. So the other thing that we learned is that just because it's protection doesn't guarantee conservation. And so we learned that that just because you say no one can put a road here, nobody can put a building here, that doesn't stop degradation from happening. So it doesn't stop invasive species, and human involvement is necessary to care for these places. And there's a lot of threats to it. So the mission is to preserve, protect, promote the interests of the Illinois Nature Preserves. And what that has turned into, the organization is young, and what we've learned is that this is bigger than just care at individual nature preserves. And that's a really, really important piece. But that connection that the Harlem Hills stewards feel to the land there, they also build a connection with one another, but they also start to understand their role as something bigger than just taking care of. They are a piece of caring for a nature preserve, but there are hundreds and hundreds of other people doing this work across the state. And they're also learning how to speak up for these natural places. And that is the other piece that is really, really important. So there's the boots on the ground work, the prescribed fire, the seed collecting, the brush cutting, but there's also the work of speaking up and finding the resources. And so that's the next piece that Friends is working on locally, but also statewide. And so we talk about building constituency for the nature preserves, for individual nature preserves, and then that spreading statewide so that people are finding more resources. This is not a check to Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves. Just so you know, I took it from an old slideshow because the Orland Grassland Project has been able to get not just $225,000, but I think millions of dollars of resources for that site because it's a combination of landowners and volunteers and then contractual work. And so that's what we're working on is increased resources. We're working on support for nature preserves and the landowning agency staff and partners. And one thing I want to talk about is the relationship we have with Melissa. So Melissa works for the DNR, which is under-resourced, and she is a passionate advocate and a hard worker and has more nature preserves than she can possibly ever care for. And so I've also heard stories from heritage biologists for DNR, but also for other agencies that own land, and they are watching this thing that they love diminish in quality. And so imagine spending your career and knowing that you stepped into a role and you're like, I finally get my dream job. My dream job is to care for these amazing places. And then realizing that you don't actually get to provide the care that they need. And you are watching this thing that you love die in front of you. And that is part of what's happening to our DNR staff and other landowning agency staff. And so we're trying to build their support and also build their morale. And so we work with them so that they don't leave. And we partner with them because their job is important. And it's also can be really depressing. And we are trying to support them and build those volunteer communities to work together in partnership. We also want knowledgeable and active citizens. So this is a volunteer here at Old Point Grove Prairies explaining to the city council members in Matheson what it is that they own. And we can't expect all of our elected officials. Daniel and I were having a conversation. Just because you are elected to office doesn't mean that you automatically have all the knowledge you need about the thing you are governing. And I'm just going to leave it there. We also want community engagement and care for the preserves. The local people can watch. We meet the neighbors. The neighbors are the ones who are watching and caring for it. We spot ATV usage, but they also, Melissa can't come and monitor the prairie buttercup day after day after day, but Daniel can, and neighbors can. And it's community engagement and care for the preserves because these belong to all of us. And so we want people to care for them. And people build a relationship and they build relationships with one another. It's good for their mental health, it's good for their physical health, and it's good for communities. And the last piece that we're working on that I want to talk a little bit about is advocacy for the preserves and biodiversity conservation. And so Friends has taken on this role with many, many partners and trying to connect partners and thinking about the statewide advocacy issues that are impacting conservation. So this is our list of things that are currently like things we're kind of working on with different partners. The IDNR consultation process doesn't work to protect endangered species very well. We have some issues with prescribed fire liability that makes it really hard for agencies and landowners to get prescribed fire onto the land. We don't have a good long-term conservation funding plan here in Illinois. We need to fix that. The tax incentives for permanent conservation easements are all wacky because our tax code doesn't work very well. But the issue I want to talk about tonight is herbicide drift or chemical trespass. Because that is one that is a big threat to our natural areas and our nature preserves, and one that we've been working on with Prairie Rivers Network. So they are an organization, a nonprofit that has really taken the lead on this, but they are also under-resourced, and their biggest expert on this lives in far southern Illinois. So these slides, most of them, I borrowed from them and talked to them about how do you want this shared, and we've been partnering with them. So herbicide drift, and I will explain more about kind of where this comes from, but the reason we are partnering with them is Kim is the woman who's been working on it with Prairie Rivers Network. A year ago, she came to the conservation policy retreat. It's a group of nonprofit leaders getting together to think about these issues. We had a breakout room, and Kim presented, and then she had a breakout room where she was going to gather people to talk about solutions to this problem. When the retreat was over, she came to me and she was almost in tears. She's like, Amy, nobody came to my room to work with this on me. Like, did I present it wrong? And I looked at her and I'm like, Kim, everybody just thinks you've got this under control and you know what the solutions are. And we just didn't know you needed, like, she looked at me and she said, the federal EPA, the US Department of Agriculture, they are asking me and my organization, what do you want us to do about it? What are the solutions? So that's where we are. And that was a year ago. And so that's kind of what I want you to know, that like, we all need to be working on this with Prairie Rivers Network. So herbicide drift, these are some charts that came from Prairie Rivers Network. Mostly what I want you to see is we use a lot of herbicide, especially in the Midwest. It really took off in 2017. So those are all the charts, and Prairie Rivers Network has all the data. I will also say I am not the scientist studying this, but the charts are super impactful. And here's where we are with basically these are the number of complaints that have been registered through the Illinois Department of Agriculture. So you can also see when it starts to take off.
Who are your partners in this effort? We talk about a team. Have you enlisted the support of a beekeeper, for example, because they experience some pretty big difficulties?
Yeah, lots of beekeepers, orchards, they are all reaching out to Prairie Rivers Network and kind of, we're trying to,
with them.
I'm not, but I think Kim and Prairie Rivers Network are trying to pull together that coalition. I'll make sure she's got beekeepers on her list.
Got a beekeeper right here.
All right. So just for those of you, the herbicide drift, they put together this really great video, and hopefully it will play, that shows this happens for two reasons. Let's see if I can make it play. There it goes. All right, so you have drift. And this is basically when the product is being applied, it doesn't stay where it's supposed to stay because of wind. But the other issue that we're seeing, slide, is vapor drift. And so I just loved these animations when they put them together. I'm like, that explains it. So this is when you have volatilization. And so yeah. And so sometimes applicators are applying their herbicides according to label directions, but then, and on a day when they're within their temperature ranges and the wind ranges, but then the next day, because Illinois weather changes. Remember, if you don't like Illinois weather, wait an hour and it will be different. Then the next day, the weather changes, it is hotter and more humid, the product volatilizes and it moves off target.
They talk about how much humidity the corn is off with us too.
Yeah.
Too.
So to see the impacts of what herbicide drift does, this is I think it's in Washington County. It is our state record holding post oak tree. And this is a picture from 2018. You can see these little people down here. This is a picture of the leaf just this year, some of the damage. But what's really impactful,
Oh.
this is some drone footage from this summer of that same tree. So that's just another aerial shot of that same tree.
Did they find the culprit?
No. I mean, so.
Monsanto.
Yeah, I mean, we know the culprit, but, and so have any of you ever filed an herbicide, a complaint with the Department of Agriculture for herbicide? Yeah. I filed my first one this year, not on my own yard, but actually on my mom's yard, on oak trees that were planted by my dad and had clear herbicide drift damage. And the inspector came out and took pictures and it went into a file.
And
So-
nothing happens.
Unless you can find who it is, like where it came from. So what we're trying to do is share the story, but also be able to share like, so that you know what it looks like. Because right now, I mean, no tree right now looks that great in Illinois. Yeah. But the symptoms of herbicide drift are very distinctive once you've seen them. And the leaves are stunted, they're cupped, they're twisted or puckered. And so here's some pictures of what that looks like on various trees. But one of the things that I think we can all help do is help people we have a lot of plant blindness. And unless you see like that picture of the state record tree is really impactful because it says, this is what this tree looked like when it was healthy in 2018. And this is what it looks like now. And so you can see this is on a peach tree and what it looks like on an apple tree. And there are lots of there are orchards, especially throughout Southern Illinois and Central Illinois that are losing their harvest every year. Red buds are particularly susceptible as well. And oaks. And so this is on a tomato plant. So what has been done, and that's kind of like I'm bringing up to speed of what has been done. So Prairie Rivers Network has been doing this monitoring for 6 years. They released this report just this year, just a couple months ago, of their 6 years of monitoring efforts. So they have a report, it's on their website. You can find this report, and I can also share it for distribution.
It was, the link to it was in our last newsletter.
Okay, good.
So it's on our website. If you don't have the newsletter, go to the website.
And so it's got all the data about like, here's what they've done in all their years of monitoring. Basically, they visited 280 unique sites. 279 of the sites had trees with herbicide drift damage. So another thing that has happened, they presented these results to the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission a couple of years ago. The Illinois Nature Preserves Commission actually funded a study by the Illinois Natural History Survey. So our own state research organization was DNR paid for a study. The Illinois Natural History Survey visited 185 sites. They found at least one pesticide in at least 74% of leaf samples. But you can also see they found evidence of herbicide damage during at least 97% of site visits and at 99% of study sites. And they visited They visited sites throughout the state. They visited nature preserves and other natural areas. So you can see, they visited some random sites and also INPC sites. So I'm not sure why they didn't visit any sites in McHenry County, but they did visit, you can see they visited sites in Winnebago, Boone, and all the way down. I mean, statewide, they were visiting sites. They were visiting sites in, but not just, also they visited sites in Cook, in DuPage, and Kane, Kendall. So they visited all over the place.
And damage is from vapor as well as drip.
Yes, yeah. And they're also finding that the damage that they're finding may be as much as a mile from the nearest agricultural field. There's also a link, so they presented their findings. This is just a tiny piece of their findings. They did present their findings at a meeting of the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission meeting in April. That video is online of them presenting their findings. They have been speaking publicly about it. They presented their findings. Their full report is available on the Nature Preserves Commission website. It was just recently posted. The director of the IDNR and the chair of the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission wrote a letter to the governor and presented and sent the report to the governor's office. And that also happened last month. So nothing yet. I mean,
Yeah.
but
That's what we're weekend.
yeah, so that's where we come in. And so just a couple of things really quick, some really interesting data about biodiversity. And when Daniel was talking about these cute plants, like some people, like they're cute plants and that's enough. They have the right to exist and we need them to exist, but biodiversity matters. And so there was a study about basically white nose syndrome in bats leads to fewer bats, leads to more insects, leads to more pesticide use, leads to infant mortality. So there we go. And I will, yeah, there are lots of studies about pesticide use and things like that. And you all know this data and have seen this before, many of you in this room, about how much prairie we have left. How much land gets used by agriculture. And 45% of US corn goes to ethanol. And I am not a farm policy expert, but.
And 90% of Illinois farms, no, 50% goes to ethanol. So what happened in 2017 that changed that all the use of atrazine and 2,4-D?
Dicamba ready seeds, like it's.
That's a herbicide resistant corn and soybeans. So instead of cultivating or just applying for corn, you would apply broadleaf herbicide, and for beans you apply a grass herbicide. Now you can just apply any herbicide to these specially genetically modified crops that are designed to not resist pests, but to resist pesticides. And I don't know what the percentage is, but some huge percentage of the acreage of corn and soybeans is now Roundup ready. And that's what changed.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of complaining, even from farmers. And the US EPA, which regulates pesticides, basically doesn't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
So there'll be more in our next newsletter about what we can do, but are there some questions for either Dan or Amy? And you need to speak into.
Oh, yes, I'm gonna stay close to that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Kim.
What do we do about airplanes spraying
Spraying.
pesticide? I was.
Well, they have
about 7 times.
they have to follow regulate. They are regulated, so they have to follow.
But
What
they
about
don't,
drift?
There,
don't, because I called them up. Paul and I were down with the bees one day, and they sprayed on the east side of my property. And they were spraying some sort of, I don't know.
So the question is, what can be done about aerial spraying
And-
pesticides?
And they were, this is aerial spraying. And they had sprayed, I called them back then after my bees died
Mm.
and said, what happened? And they had sprayed pesticide the day before, didn't wash out their tanks because he was gonna spray.
Oh, well, that's a clear violation.
So,
And so, anyway, this year I called them up, they will call me when they're, when they're gonna spray. And I said, absolutely no planes flying over my place, because they would spray, come to my property line and raise up. But they
Yes.
stopped spraying, and the drift of that
Yes.
plane pulled
I mean-
over onto my property.
it's one of the issues that we have is that the only thing you can do is file a complaint with the
Yes.
Department of Ag.
I know.
Fiona?
And
I was gonna ask if the chemicals that are out there that you're talking about, are any of these chemicals on our lawns? Because I don't think.
Yes.
Field,
The-
but I do live around.
The question is, are these chemicals used on lawns and golf courses? Yes.
Yeah, they
And-
started adding dicamba to like BB golf, and all these things, so that now has dicamba in it.
Take a visit to your hardware store and go to the lawn care section and turn those things around and those chemicals are in, we can buy them.
My neighbors have the company show up with it. I mean, right, thing.
Yes.
Oh,
Because the local companies, because they're not regulated as far as like Mindy Days or anything like that, and come and spray it along. So it's
Well,
not like they have the same kind of regulation as someone doing agricultural.
The question is, are lawn care companies regulated the same as agriculture? Yes, they are, but it's not enforced.
I mean, your recourse is that there's a complaint process through the Department of Ag, and some counties are better than others at sending someone out to respond. But unless they can figure out which applicator did it, and sometimes they can, but there's not necessarily any recourse, but if there are complaints to be filed, we should file them, because believe it or not, Illinois is head and shoulders above our neighboring states, because this isn't an Illinois problem. And Illinois can lead in fixing it, but Illinois can't just fix it. But Illinois is head and shoulders above all of our Midwestern neighbors in understanding and having data and knowing about this problem and reporting complaints.
If the airplanes in Wisconsin, it's still the Department of Ag?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. How do you go about doing reporting?
How do you make the reports?
Oh, to the department, on the Illinois Department of Ag website, also on Prairie Rivers Network on their site, there's a link to the complaint process. And there is a form, I actually, part of why I filed the complaint on my mom's property is number one, because there was clear herbicide drift damage on trees my dad planted, but also because I wanted to know how does the process work. And there's a form that you fill out and you submit it. And then the inspector will call and they will come out and visit your site. In my mom's case, I submitted the form right before Memorial Day weekend and the inspector came the Tuesday after Memorial Day. So he was very responsive at showing up. But beyond that.
So anyone at home have a question? Just unmute yourself and ask the question. While we're waiting, do you have a sign-up sheet here for volunteers?
I have some information over here with, information about our work days and it has contact information, so I'll grab them. Show you. So I've got some postcards here, and if anyone is interested in signing up to be on our email list, I asked.
Jerry,
And I,
Jerry,
Yes.
this is Jane Evans. I had milkweed growing out by the street and I was taking care of caterpillars and my daughter was going on vacation and I was taking care of her caterpillars. Meantime, somebody came and sprayed on two sides of our house, across the street. And I thought that I was washing the milkweed every time, but still I lost every caterpillar. So what can be done about that?
I mean, you can still file a
Everybody heard
complaint.
that.
Yes.
You can still file a complaint with the Department of Agriculture for that. I mean, it's the same process. The other thing that the Illinois Natural History Survey is studying, the other thing we can all do is advocate for more funding for the Natural History Survey to continue their study and the report. They're studying what are the impacts on our caterpillars and our moths and our butterflies and insects who feed on these plants that have been impacted by herbicides. So.
It takes diligence. Oh, last question.
I might have a follow-up. too. How is the Friends of the Illinois Nature Preserves funded, and how big is your staff?
Is Friends of Nature Preserves funded, and how big is your staff?
We are funded through donations, individuals and some foundations. And we recently were awarded some grant funding from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources that will short-term funding to hire some field representatives for some specific areas where we have partnerships. It's a long story, but let's see, there's me, Jesse, Stone, Joe, Rob, Rebecca, and we're about to bring on a few more people for Illinois. Yeah.
I'm curious about your slide before that says things that we can do, and one of the things was penalties for perennials, and I don't know what that means.
So the things that we think we can ask legislators for, like this is our long-term solution. We need to diversify agriculture, but that's not going to happen tomorrow. But the things that we need that legislators and our state departments to do, we need better monitoring. We need all of us to be filing complaints so there's accurate